Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Canada will begin receiving 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines per week. The University of Lethbridge and Lethbridge College are both receiving federal grants totaling $400,000. We will explain what the money will be used for. And we hear from more faith leaders about how they've been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Ottawa announced that we will start receiving deliveries of 1 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines per week, beginning in around 10 days from now. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says those deliveries will continue right through until May 10th. Moderna is expected to deliver around 846,000 doses of its vaccine the week of March 22nd.
We have shared these updated delivery schedules with the provinces and territories. This is so they can continue to plan for mass vaccination sites to get you and your family protected as soon as possible. Every dose makes a difference. Last week, Susan from DDO in Montreal wrote to me to say that she and her husband, who are both seniors, had gotten their first dose. She told me about the relief they felt after a year of worrying.
Trudeau says vaccinations are also being administered in more than 530 Indigenous communities. He says the government is working with the provinces to get First Nations people in urban areas their shots as soon as possible. The United Conservatives announced today that our province's vaccination program is expanding to include 437,000 Albertans aged 65 to 74 beginning on March 15th. Also eligible to book vaccinations starting Monday are First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people born 1971 or earlier. Phase 2A will also include staff and residents of licensed senior supportive living facilities who have not yet received their vaccine. The Alberta government says those who are booking appointments in Phase 2A will receive the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. To date, more than 333,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine have been administered to Albertans. Two groups representing Alberta Police are urging the province to consider including frontline first responders in the next phase of the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. The Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police and the Alberta Federation of Police Associations say they recognize there are challenges deciding who goes first, but want first responders to be given some thought. They say timely vaccination would help reduce challenges with staffing and service levels and to ensure the safety of those who regularly interact with people. Police in Lethbridge dealt with a high-risk search warrant execution earlier today. Police say the incident took place at a home in the 1900 block of 18th Avenue North around 4 o'clock this afternoon. Members of the LPS tactical team helped out. Details are sketchy, but one of the neighbors told our reporter that it was a drug bust. We'll have more information for you as it becomes available. The recent Labour Force survey says there were 17,000 jobs created in Alberta last month. The Minister of Jobs, Economy and Innovation says that brings our unemployment rate to its lowest level in a year. Doug Schweitzer says this is a good sign that the Alberta economy is slowly bouncing back. In his statement, Schweitzer said this earlier today. We need to keep working to build our economy in new and existing sectors. We need to keep building, and Budget 2021 provides record support for jobs and growth. It will set the stage for economic recovery. There's an Alberta UCP MLA who says the provincial government lockdown measures need to end right now. Drew Barnes, who's the MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, says if the restrictions do not end soon, the government may see a lot of lawsuits as a result.
I believe there's a reckoning coming for this. You know, it's so sad. We're, community of 63,000 and we have to be over 20 suicides, never mind the addictions and the overdoses and the strife that you just can't measure. And it's one of the reasons I joined the anti-lockdown caucus. Let's measure what the government's doing. Let's look at all the effects. Let's talk about it. If there's going to be a COVID-20, or if we're going to have to go into lockdown again, let's continually strive to do the best we can for all Albertans.
MLA Barnes will also share his thoughts on equalization payments and how a referendum on the topic is needed ASAP. That Q&A with Jeanette Rocher is coming up after Business News. AUCP members introduced a bill in the Alberta Legislature to increase the speed limit on some divided highways to 120 kilometers an hour. Cyril Turton's private member's bill calls for allowing motorists to use freeways at speeds they were designed and engineered for. He says evidence shows this would make Alberta's highways safer. Turton, who is a member for Spruce Grove Stony Plain, says the proposed legislation would not affect freeways or highways within urban areas. A recent Angus Reid poll says the majority of Albertans are dead set against a provincial sales tax. The idea has been discussed at the legislature recently as the UCP is trying to find ways of getting back to black and balance its books. The recent survey said 62% of Albertans do not want the extra tax. Among UCP voters, 76% completely rejected the idea of a PST. Franco Terrazzano, Alberta Director from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, says Albertans have spoken.
We have spoken loud and clear. Albertans do not want a provincial sales tax. And, we need Premier Jason Kenney. We need our MLAs to come out and to completely shut the door on these out of touch calls for a sales tax. We need to hear the Premier and MLAs reject sales taxes today, but we also need to hear them reject them tomorrow and in the future. And you know what? Our MLAs and Premier Kenney need to remember that we didn't send them to Edmonton so that they could have their turn reaching deeper into our pockets with a sales tax. And that's why we think it's time to finally put this sales tax talk to bed.
The Alberta Taxpayer Protection Act requires politicians to hold a referendum before they can implement a PST. Jason Kenney has said as long as he's Premier, he will uphold the act. For many, tax season can be very stressful, and even more this year during the pandemic. This tax season opens with new rules thanks to COVID-19. Now, if you're self-employed and claiming items like mortgage payments, utilities, and internet, that can make or break your business. Tax experts say the choice can be very complicated.
Tax season for business owners will be different because there's a lot of subsidies have come through and no deadlines are really getting extended. So people are still going to have to go through and get their taxes filed and make sure that they pay their taxes on time. There's no real relief for a lot of business owners on that side of it. Last year it was a little bit more, pushed back to September, but this year it doesn't seem like that's the case. Biggest thing for most of our clients this year is just how the pandemic has really impacted their revenue side and how some of the wage subsidies have really helped keep them afloat. I think the challenge will probably be more into 2021 when some of the wage subsidies turn off, how people can kind of get back on and do the things that they will need to do. Make sure you file on time so you don't have your interest and penalties that kick in. And if you do need to make arrangements if you don't have the cash to pay it, talk to CRA. They're usually able to come up with some payment plans to help you through.
If you need more information about filing this year, you can always call the CRA tax hotline at 1-800-959-8281. The University of Lethbridge and Lethbridge College will be receiving funding to help enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the post-secondary community. The 2-year federal grant of $400,000 each will support the career advancement, recruitment, and retention of unrepresented groups.
We would hire an EDI strategist who would help us basically engage our institution in activities. So really around 3 key areas, looking at raising awareness, education, and of course implementation of activities that would help include the diversity of our campus.
It's a movement that's really entrenched in a nexus of injustice it's complex, it's entrenched, and it's deeply historical. And it involves multiple groups, so multiple identifiable groups in post-secondary education who experience barriers, systemic barriers to access, to equitable treatment, to equitable outcomes. And this isn't the result always of manifest behavior, but this is because of the way our policies and our processes and our structures have developed over time. So, in a sense, it's a nexus of injustice that has to be reconstructed, but it impacts many, many groups of people.
Federal Minister of Innovation, Francois-Philippe Champagne, says 12 institutions will be sharing close to $4.8 million in total funding. The Edwin Parr Award is given to teachers who showcase exemplary skills when they start their teaching careers. The pandemic has changed the way that teachers are able to interact with their students. And for one local teacher who was nominated, she has transitioned well to form a stronger bond with her students. Micah Quinn has the details.
Amanda Omelan says that she was in shock when she heard that she was the nominee for the Edwin Parr Award.
It was something that I thought was really exciting and good for our CCH community, just as to kind of show the colors that we have in our school and how we can kind of let our light shine. So definitely something I was blessed and humbled to hear about.
Omelan started teaching at Catholic Central High School a year ago, and the principal for the school, Joanne Pollock, says that Omelan was the perfect candidate for the nomination.
And when the call for nominations for the Edwin Parr came out, I certainly jumped on that because I just think that she absolutely imbues everything that a teacher should be. She's committed, she's passionate, she's professional. As a Catholic educator too, she's very committed to her faith and being a servant leader. And so my reaction wasn't really a surprise. It was just a confirmation of what absolutely should have happened.
The pandemic has brought with it challenges in the way that teachers teach their students, but Omelan says that she wants students to know that they are seen.
Even just the small acts of kindness throughout the day, I think, has been something that I've been more cognizant of stepping into that, because I think even just the little things that us teachers can do are huge in their eyes and in their world. So even just having them for that 6 or 7 hours a day, I think that's the time where we get to choose how we make an impact on them.
Edwin Parr Award winner will be announced next month. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Book lovers can now make their way to the Lethbridge Public Library in our city. The library announced that they'll be reopening on March 17th with a 15% capacity for residents. The CEO of the library, Tara Plato, says it's great to be back, but the library wants to ensure that they continue to limit the spread of COVID-19 for their patrons.
We are excited to reopen. We're very conscious of safety for everybody because obviously in a public facing role, it does, increase people's vulnerability when there is more interaction with the public. So we have all the safety measures in place, but staff are excited to get to serve the customer in person once again. We are going to continue obviously doing a lot of our online services and programs for the foreseeable future, but this does allow us to have some in-person interaction again.
Plato says that building access will be limited to 1 adult per family. Hair salons that have been allowed to reopen in Alberta have been scrambling to slot in a backlog of clients who are looking to clean up during the lockdown. As BCN's Loris Alexander explains, some stylists are having a tough time trying to keep up with the demand of tangled tresses.
Busy, because of course everybody's been waiting. And after the first shutdown, it was ridiculous busy. The spa, people were a little bit more nervous to come back, but this time it's been busy, but a little bit more steady busy, which is fabulous. And people are coming back to the spa.
Taitula says the best part is her guests and staff are all amazing to work with.
We have great guests. We have a team that has this amazing culture. Like, we're just so thankful and happy that we get to see our guests again. I had a guest say to us the other day, I feel safer at Brio than I do at Costco.
Business is going exceptionally well as the appointments are rolling in.
Some of our service providers book a year out. But for sure, even our newer service providers are booking in advance now, just because people are still catching up. And I think that there's some feeling of normalcy when we get to go get our hair cut, or we get a facial, or we get our lashes done, pedicure. I know there's that feeling of things just feels more normal. It's something normal that we get to do. I'm just so thankful that there's this whole shopping local thing. And I feel like Lethbridge people really, really take that to heart. And we're local. Lethbridge has been amazing to myself and my family. And so we support local as well, and we'll do whatever we can to keep local businesses going here in Lethbridge.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Health officials are warning about the spread of more transmissible COVID-19 variants in Regina. 70 variant cases have now been confirmed in Saskatchewan, most of them in the provincial capital. The health ministry says many of the outbreaks occurred when people went to work with symptoms. Another 165 COVID-19 infections were reported in the province on Thursday, including 51 in Regina. A proposed class action lawsuit filed in Saskatchewan against Extended Care alleges it did not have proper infection controls in place to deal with COVID-19. Court documents reveal that internal audits had warned of pre-existing issues, including a lack of single rooms at its long-term care facilities. The suit also alleges that residents who survived outbreaks were locked in their rooms. The allegations have not been proven in court. The suit is seeking damages for loss of life, emotional distress, and medical treatment for long-term COVID-19 effects. Manitoba is easing COVID-19 restrictions on outdoor dining at restaurants and pubs. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Brent Rusin says beginning Saturday, up to 6 people from different households will be allowed to dine together on outdoor patios. Indoor restaurant dining will continue to be limited to members of the same household.
So the outdoor patios don't have any limitation on where those 6 people come from. My advice is to limit it, to perhaps keep that with the people you are bubbling with, would be the best advice. But there isn't that specific requirement. So, I think together we need to work on those fundamentals and try to do what we can to limit interactions. But because it's outdoors, we thought it's an appropriate time to give Manitobans a little bit more opportunity to get together with people.
Many faith leaders around the world are still dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Fortunately, many showed resilience and found reasons for hope as they refocused their mission during such uncertain times.
It was scary at the beginning. It was scary not knowing what to do, especially being alone here and just being ordained 2 years, not knowing what do I do, how can I help the situation, how can I help the people out, and how do I deal with one's own emotions.
Más tarde esta tarde, mañana por la mañana, para que colguemos, voy a llamar al Padre Miguel, que trabaja.
It was stressful because you would see moments that were supposed to be beautiful, that deserved to be beautiful. Some of my experiences using technology, some of those memories are in some ways found a way to be as holy as the ones in person, just differently, and that surprised me. I was encouraged by that. I was sustained by that, to see that, oh, all is not lost. Love finds a way.
It really hit home to the congregation when a longtime member of our church passed away from COVID. I think there's a real longing, really, at this point, to return back to, what it was before, and even, just to reestablish community with each other.
We're approaching the middle of March, but it feels more and more like the middle of May, doesn't it? Great weather we've been having, and a beautiful weekend is shaping up as well. Full weather details are coming up. The warm temperatures continue to much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is back with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it should be a wonderful weekend for a barbecue.
Yeah, well, I know I, for one, am certainly ready to fire up my grill and sit out on the deck this weekend. I don't know about you. It's supposed to be a lovely, sunny day tomorrow. And you know what? Not so much wind either, only about a 15 kilometer per hour wind tomorrow. Not too bad, high of 15 degrees. Wonder if we're going to break a record tomorrow, because tomorrow's highest day on record is about 15.2. So we'll have to keep an eye on that for sure. Into Sunday, look at that temperature, 18 degrees the high, lots of sunshine. Into Monday though, here's where we're going to see some rain, high of 5 degrees. Overnight on Monday into Tuesday, we're looking at a 30% chance of showers or flurries. Into Tuesday though, mix of sun and cloud, 7 degrees is the high, and then back up to 10 degrees for Wednesday and 12 degrees for a Thursday. So I'm loving these plus temperatures into the teens, certainly getting us out of the seasonal average. Average high 5 degrees for this time of year, average low -7. 18 was our high temperature back in 2007, and in 1950 it was -26. 6:51 is when the sun woke up this morning, and our sun set this evening at 6:31 p.m. So let's take a look at the rest of the country. Actually, not a bad looking day tomorrow for most of the country. Look at the west coast here. Lots of sunshine, 13 degrees, 14 in Vancouver, also sunny. Sunny skies across the rest of Alberta as well. Edmonton's high, 11 degrees, 11 also in Calgary. Also not so much wind, about 20 kilometers per hour for both Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow. Well, it's the time of year where you're getting that weird wind chill in the morning that's keeping things into the minus teens in Saskatchewan, but then in the afternoon they're getting that UV index of 4. So lots of sunshine across the prairies tomorrow, 4 degrees the high for Saskatoon, 9 for Regina, and also Winnipeg sitting at 9 degrees tomorrow. Over in Toronto, lovely sunny day, 6 degrees the high. 0 in Ottawa, and -3 is the high in Montreal. So that's kind of our chilly spot tomorrow. Also, Montreal getting a bit of gusty winds tomorrow, up to 40 or 50 kilometers per hour. As we look further into Atlantic Canada, we're seeing a slight chance of flurries for both Fredericton and Halifax tomorrow. Fredericton's high 4, Halifax 1. We got a chance of flurries developing in the afternoon tomorrow with a high of 0 in Charlottetown. And St. John's, Newfoundland sitting at 4 degrees under sunny skies with some gusty winds there as well. So there you go. That is your forecast. It might not feel like it, but if you feel like strapping on those snowboard boots and heading to the mountains, we got our ski report coming up next.
Today's weather is brought to you by ColumbianDirect.com. Café Coffee, specialty coffee from our family to yours. Castle Mountain saw 3 centimeters of new snowfall over the past 72 hours and has a 106 centimeter base. Nikiska received 3 centimeters of snow with a 120 centimeter base. Sunshine Village saw 4 centimeters of fresh powder over the past 72 hours and has a 196 centimeter base. And Lake Louise received 6 centimeters of new snow and has a 150 centimeter base. Mount Norquay has seen 4 centimeters of new snowfall over the past 72 hours, leaving a 127 centimeter base. And in BC, Panorama received 1 centimeter of snow with a 70 centimeter base. Fernie and Kimberley did not receive any new snowfall but retained solid snow bases, with Fernie at 88 centimeters and Kimberley at 80 centimeters. And that's a look at your Bridge City News Ski Report.
Stats Canada says Canada has regained nearly all of the jobs lost in December and January thanks to employment growth last month. The agency says the economy added 259,000 jobs in February. That is 3.5 times higher than what economists had anticipated. That pushed the national unemployment rate from 9.4 to 8.2%, which is the lowest level since March of last year. Stats Canada says most of the gains, however, were in Ontario and Quebec. And economists still feel that despite the quick turnaround in jobs, the labour market has a long way to go to get back to where it was prior to the pandemic. Stats Canada also says low interest rates and housing prices pushed demand for mortgage loans to a record $34.9 billion in the last 3 months of 2020. That beat the previous high of $28.7 billion set in the third quarter. Household debt as a portion of income rose to 175% from 170.8% in the third quarter. That is still well below the 181% recorded at the end of 2019. Growth in the value of real estate helped push national net worth up 4.3% from the previous quarter to almost $358,000. Netflix is testing a way to crack down on password sharing. The company says it will be asking some users to verify their account via email or text, or to verify later. Netflix isn't saying if the pop-up message is only going to its North American customers or to others. Netflix's most popular plan allows 2 simultaneous streams, but there's never been a limit on sharing an account when you're not streaming at the same time. The Dutch inventor of the cassette tape has died at the age of 94. Philips confirmed that Lou Ottens died last Saturday. Ottens was the head of the Dutch company's product development when he began work on an alternative for existing tape recorders with their large spools of tape. More than 100 billion cassettes were sold after the final product was created in 1962. Cassette's popularity waned after the development of the compact disc, which is another invention Ottens helped to create as supervisor of the development team. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 7 points on the day to finish at 18,851. The Dow was up 293 points to 32,779. The S&P 500 was up 4 points to 3943, and the Nasdaq was down 78 points to 13,320. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 50 cents to 65.52 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to 2.59 U.S. Gold was up 4.51 to 17.27.11 U.S. an ounce, and silver was down 20 cents on the day to 25.92 U.S. an ounce. Wheat is at $306 per metric ton, barley's at $310, canola's at $804, and corn is at $341 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 48 cents to $119, feeder cattle were up $1.10 to $136.35, and lean hogs were down 10 cents to $91.40. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 80.15 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Ottawa announced that Canada will start receiving deliveries of 1 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines per week, beginning in around 10 days from now. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says those deliveries will continue right through until May the 10th. Moderna is expected to deliver around 846,000 doses of its vaccine the week of March 22nd. A Cyprus Medicine Hat MLA says his government needs to lift restrictions on Albertans as soon as possible. Hear the thoughts of MLA Drew Barnes in an exclusive interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher in just a moment.
Albertans want a fair deal from Ottawa and the rest of the nation as the province continues to pour huge dollar amounts into equalization payments. There's a separatist movement brewing here as a result. Today's guest is very outspoken on this issue, as well as the move to end COVID lockdown measures. Drew Barnes is the MLA for Cyprus Medicine Hat in Southeast Alberta, and he is joining me now from his car via Zoom. Welcome to Bridge City News, Drew.
Jeanette, thanks for talking to me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get started about getting a fair deal for Alberta, we just had the provincial budget come down. Can you briefly share your thoughts on the pros and cons? Is going into deeper debt justified?
No, well, first of all, the deeper debt is part of our problem with Ottawa. The fact that $25 billion a year leaves Alberta, the fact that this year's deficit is $20.2 billion, next year's is estimated to be $18.2, the savings are right there. Previous governments, previous lack of attention by taxpayers has led to where Alberta is now $100 billion in debt. Interest next year will be $2.7 billion, Jeanette. My goodness, that's more than whole departments. That money could be better spent on Albertans that need health, education, or social services. One of the good news, though, in the provincial finance minister's budget is he is going to bring per capita spending down to the same level of other big provinces. And it's time for Alberta to start to not only get a better deal with Ottawa, but get our spending in order.
Right. Okay. Now, Drew, you're on Alberta's Fair Deal panel because you're saying Albertans want a fair deal, obviously. So you believe that Alberta should adopt a provincial constitution. How do you see this helping our situation?
Well, first of all, a written Alberta constitution would go a long way. It would help pull all the cultural components of Alberta together so we can work together, Jeanette. And secondly, it would tell our Canadian partners that we believe in resource movement, we believe in risk taking, we believe in charity, we believe in helping communities. And then secondly, it could define the size of government. We have seen time and time again how Ottawa especially reaches into our lives. They can't control our resources because we own them, so they make laws that impact the environment, the tanker ban, the no more pipelines laws. It would be a way to start to put those things in writing to protect Alberta and our future. And it would be the start of the Alberta autonomy that we need to build so we can get that Ottawa's $25 billion out of our economy off our back, and we can start to direct a strong and free Alberta.
This fall, we'll see Albertans voting in a provincial referendum on the equalization. Certainly here in southern Alberta, a lot of us believe that we're getting hosed, but what do you think this referendum will actually accomplish?
Well, I think, first of all, a strong signal from Albertans that we've had enough of paying for, all the costs across Canada, way more than our proportionate share, then Ottawa denying us resource movement, Ottawa denying us a chance to have Senate reform, and even the same amount of support as they give to other parts of Canada. That will be the start of that signal, and that will go a long way to do some goods. But Jeanette, it may die there. So it's one of the reasons about 10 days ago, I came out and I said the same day as our provincial election, which would be about a year after the equalization referendum, so October 2023, we need a referendum on independence. We need to put Ottawa on notice that Albertans have had enough, that it's time for a fair deal. We're willing to take the risk of opening the Constitution, of standing up to Ottawa if they don't give us resource movement, democratic reform, and fairness. And this way, Albertans can be the judge as to whether Ottawa is given enough, as to whether Ottawa has given us equality.
Well, that's true, but do you believe that Albertans would actually be better off as a nation than as a province?
Well, I just believe that Alberta should be the freest, most prosperous place. We got the best people. We're risk takers, agriculture, forestry. We have the third biggest oil reserve in the world. Landlocked, we're landlocked by our physical nature. So landlocked is not a difference. We'd be less bottlenecked if we were independent than we are if Ottawa, controls us the way they do now. Jeanette, I just believe that Alberta should be the freest, most prosperous place. If that's within Canada, that's great. If that's not within Canada, that's great too.
So where would you peg support for independence at? What are you hearing from your constituents about that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I would say about 30% now. 30% of people that have had enough with Ottawa believe they will never change, are so tired of the Laurentian elite controlling us. But the Fair Deal panel showed it's up to 80%. 80% of Albertans want to take some level of risk, want to do some pushback to Ottawa to open the Constitution, to get resource movement, to stop equalization, to have our own police force, have our own pension, have our own control over immigration. So that 30% that I think would vote in favor of Alberta independence today could grow as high as 80%, depending on what happens the next little while with Ottawa's treating us fairly or not.
So let's say Alberta votes down a separation. So do you think a referendum would strengthen our hand in negotiating a better deal with Ottawa?
Yeah, first of all, I'm wondering why, like 10 provinces, how it ever evolved to where one of the 10 is treated so unfairly compared to the rest. I mean, Saskatchewan is in a similar boat, I suppose. But why wouldn't our Canadian partners want a fairer deal anyway? It would be good for everyone. So I think the more we raise that awareness, there's many, many hardworking people in Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes that aren't as clear on the situation, aren't as clear on the policy details as we are. I think anytime you shed light on something, anytime Albertans let all Canadians know where we stand, that's only going to be good. I'm not afraid of losing a referendum.
Okay, so Drew, you and a UCP colleague, MLA Angela Pitt, have joined the End the Lockdowns National Caucus as part of your efforts to see more personal freedoms and also to enable small businesses to stay alive. So can you tell us a bit more about this caucus?
I sure can. Last count, it was about 45 MPs, former MPs, MLAs, and councilmen, and former politicians across Canada that believe the lockdowns have done as much mental health and economic damage as handling the COVID crisis. My goodness, southeastern Alberta, our mental health crisis is huge. It's at least as bad as the COVID crisis. I'm hearing the same from around Alberta. That's very, very sad. So this is a way to highlight, we've never been in a pandemic where we shut everything down before. So this is a way to highlight and review the government's responses to this COVID-19, to the pandemic. Are they going to lock us down every year? Is it time to open up? I mean, large parts of southern Alberta have 0 cases or very few. I've been arguing for regional cases. So Jeanette, one of the main things we're trying to do is make all premiers and prime ministers and government officials, decision makers, aware that the lockdown is having dramatic effects, aware it's different in all parts of the province, and hopefully, like, shining light, some transparency on this will make it better for Albertans.
Now, the lockdown measures have, of course, caused all kinds of division. So what's been the feedback that you've been hearing from your constituents? And has there been a difference between rural and urban citizens?
Oh, I absolutely believe there is a difference between rural and urban. Again, we for large parts of the 12 months that we've been under regulation and lockdown, our areas had 0 cases or very, very small. People know that, the first standard, like a lot of small businesses that were totally safe, that weren't allowed to open. Gyms are the best example. We need that physical and mental health that goes with that. And they're still not fully open, where there could be long-term consequences of that. And Jeanette, the response from my constituents has been wonderful. I had about 40 of them come to my office last week, and not a protest, but they were in front of my office in support of me calling for more regional restrictions for COVID. And we definitely want to help each other, but we also know that that there's mental health and there's economic effects as well.
So sort of an anti-protest, if you will. Now with Medicine Hat particularly, I know has just had so much mental health issues there. Now, do you think that a year or two from now, we may actually see all kinds of lawsuits against various levels of government because of deaths and medical distress inadvertently caused by lockdown measures?
I believe we will. I believe there's a reckoning coming for this. It's so sad. We're, community of 63,000 and we have to be over 20 suicides, never mind the addictions and the overdoses and the strife that you just can't measure. And it's one of the reasons I joined the anti-lockdown caucus. Let's measure what the government's doing. Let's look at all the effects. Let's talk about it. If there's going to be a COVID-20, or if we're going to have to go into lockdown again, let's continually strive to do the best we can for all Albertans. And again, this is a brand new situation. So let's get it the best we can going forward.
Yeah, how wide would you like to see our province opened up? Like what kinds of restrictions would you be okay with?
I think we can have a bigger floor square footage capacity for occupancy for churches and for small businesses. I think that, and especially, I guess regional is the main thing. Large parts of rural Alberta have no cases or one small little cluster of cases. We're in our 12th month of COVID. There's a lot of fatigue out there, Jeanette, and I think if this is going to last longer, and people also need some of the essentials. The chance to be spiritual, to go to church, that's essential. To go to a gym, physical and workout, that's essential. There's just so many things that we cannot overlook. Normal day-to-day human activity, physical and social and spiritual are three of them.
Yeah. Now, Drew, are you concerned at all about getting booted from the UCP caucus? Are you getting pressure from some fellow MLAs to stop speaking out about lockdowns?
No, I'm very grateful for Premier Kenny in that at this point. There's been very, very little pushback as to what I've been saying. Actually, I've been encouraged to speak out and try to work it as part of the team as well. I mean, the government from sometimes has messages that they want to take front and center. And, I think it's important for Albertans to realize I'm not in cabinet. I'm not a decision maker. So although I'm at caucus meetings and I can talk, I'm not part of those decisions. So at this point, I'm just going to continue to speak up and I'm going to continue to relay what Albertans are telling me.
Now, the opposition has something else to say about that. You were mentioning before that it Rachel Notley had something.
Rachel Notley for 3 times has asked me to be kicked out of caucus by Premier Kenny because I've questioned and I've asked for more transparency on the COVID lockdowns. Funnily enough, she put it on her Facebook page 3 or 4 days ago, asking her people to ask Premier Kenny to kick me out. And as of this morning, I was leading that poll about 70-30, where 70% of the people were saying, no, you shouldn't kick him out. His voters put him there. He's speaking some things we want to talk about. He's presenting some different ideas and some truths. And Jeanette, that's one of the things we need in Alberta. We need some democratic reform where people like me, government backbenchers, have the opportunity to speak up consistently for the 50,000 people we represent, rather than just relay the government message. So I'm pleased to be able to do that.
Yeah. Now, before we let you go, Drew, any thoughts on the efforts we see to shut down free speech when it comes to dissenting opinions on how to deal with COVID? Where is this going to end up?
Well, thank you for that question. Isn't that incredibly, like so many people have tried to quiet, especially the conservative voices. We have forgotten that free speech, challenging each other, makes everything better. It allows us to exhaust our ideas and fully promote them. I always think of the Israeli army. I hear when they develop a plan, even if everybody in the room likes it, they appoint 1 or 2 people as the people to be the devil's advocate, to speak against the plan, to sharpen it up. Respectfully, we can do that. Respectfully, we should all speak up to make Alberta better and stronger for our communities, our families, and our kids. And I'm concerned about the culture now that armchair warriors that continually jump in and try to silence especially people with conservative voices. But respectfully and loudly, let's all continue to speak up and let's present the things that conservatives are trying to conserve: truth, beauty, the right to take risk and be self-reliant, and charity. And I'm a believer in respectfully, let's all speak up more than we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Drew, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate you coming on the show. Drew Barnes is the MLA for the Cypress Medicine Hat riding in Southeast Alberta.
Thank you very much, Jeanette.
A new study has found the wait times when it comes to our healthcare industry reached 22.6 weeks last year in 2020. That is the longest ever recorded and 143% higher than the 9.3 weeks Canadians waited back in 1993 when wait times were originally tracked. Joining me now to talk about this is Bacchus Brua, the Associate Director of Health Policy Studies with the Fraser Institute in Vancouver, and one of the co-authors of the study, which you can read by visiting the Fraser Institute's website. Bacchus, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. Now, first of all, I think people might argue that the longer wait times in 2020 were simply because of COVID and the crisis going on right now. Is that the case, or is there evidence to suggest otherwise?
You know, I think it's important to say up front that our healthcare workers are just doing a fantastic job, and they deserve all of our support and all of our gratefulness and appreciation for the terrific hardships that they've faced. 2020 was, of course, a very difficult year for a number of different reasons. And one of them shows in our survey, and that's that Canadians across the country were waiting longer than we've ever recorded in our survey. As you mentioned, the average wait time that we saw between getting a referral to getting treatment was 22.6 weeks. Now, absolutely, COVID will have likely had an impact on those wait times. But one of the things that we can do is we can actually just look at what wait times were the year before. So when we look at wait times in 2019, we actually find that the wait time even then was at about 21 weeks. So I think what the survey is telling us is that COVID has likely exacerbated the wait time situation, but unfortunately, wait times have been a historical issue in Canada and seem to persist and only get worse because of the current pandemic.
Now, Bacchus, can you explain exactly how you measure the wait times?
You know, we've been doing this study for almost 30 years now. And the way that we do it is we try and contact every single doctor who is part of the Canadian Medical Association. This year, we're looking at about more than 10,000 doctors who we tried to contact. We have responses from about 1,200 doctors, which is lower than usual, lower than other years. It's about 11%, but because we're surveying the population of physicians, that's still a very large number. In Alberta, it's almost 200 doctors who responded to our survey. So these are, real experiences from real doctors. We're looking at 12 different specialties. These were specialties that were decided in conjunction on the advice of the British Columbia Medical Association in the early 1990s. It's, like I said, a very old survey. And, fortunately in Alberta, we do seem to have responses from about 200 physicians in those 12 specialties.
So how bad are things really? What are doctors telling us? To what degree are patients having to wait for treatment after seeing a specialist?
Well, as you mentioned, we're actually looking at two different portions of the wait time. The first wait that patients face is between getting a referral to seeing the specialist, and that's at about 10 weeks. And then there's a further wait from seeing a specialist to actually receiving treatment, which is at about 12 weeks. Most governments have usually tended to focus on that second wait time, and although there have been some very good improvements about tracking that first wait as well. But when we're looking exclusively at that second wait, when essentially a physician and a patient have decided that treatment is required, we're seeing that physicians are reporting that their patients are waiting about 4 weeks longer than what they consider to be clinically reasonable. And that number is even longer when we look at Alberta, where it jumps up to almost 6 weeks longer than what is clinically reasonable. Never mind what is actually comfortable and desired by the patient themselves.
So Bacchus, big picture right now, are wait times actually improving in Canada, or are we getting progressively worse?
Unfortunately, it's bad news. As I mentioned, we've been tracking this for 30 years. When we started the survey, the wait time was only 9.3 weeks. And even at that time, that caused a huge stir. But unfortunately, over time, we're seeing wait times go up and up every single year. And this year, it's 22.6 weeks. As you mentioned, COVID has likely impacted that wait time, but this is a long historic issue that we've struggled to grapple with. And unfortunately, we don't look like we're winning that fight right now.
But aren't we spending more tax dollars than ever before in healthcare? And if that's the case, why on earth are wait times getting so much longer?
You know, we saw massive increases in healthcare spending, particularly between 2000 and 2010. We've seen, some dips in that spending, never decreases, but the slowing of the rate of growth in the middle of the 2010s to 2015, 16. And again, we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick back in the spending. Unfortunately, the answer is, I don't know. We're not seeing that money translate into shorter wait times, despite there being several programs that actually target those funds into tackling wait times. What we're seeing consistently is that regardless of what's being spent, wait times have increased over time. The one thing that we haven't really tried, or that very few provinces have tried, is actually looking at differences in policy. Now, some of that is restricted with regards to what provinces can do within the confines of the Canada Health Act, but there are a number of things that provinces could potentially try. But unfortunately, we live in a bit of a risk-averse environment when it comes to policy, where essentially a lot of politicians try to not touch healthcare lest they get a lot of backlash, which is very unfortunate because essentially it means we're going to be stuck with the problems that we've seen historically.
I'm curious to know which province had the longest wait times and which one had the shortest.
Unfortunately, we do see the longest wait times in most of the Atlantic provinces, particularly in Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, where wait times are crossing 40 weeks. Now, this has been a historical departure. The Atlantic provinces have traditionally struggled a little bit more than the Canadian average, but those differences were much, much smaller in 1993 and 1994 when we started measuring it, and that gap has only widened over time. Unfortunately, in our study, we can't actually pinpoint and identify why those differences occur, but this is precisely why we do the studies, to say, hey, there are differences amongst these provinces. Have a look. Let's try and understand what's actually going on in these different provinces.
So what can we do, or maybe the government do, to try and improve those wait times?
I think in this global scenario, one of the things that COVID has done is brought the world together in a very unique way. It's made us much more aware of different parts of the world, of the same and similar struggles that we face, and the fact that there are several other healthcare systems that we can learn from. I think one of the things that is important for Canadians to know is that we aren't alone or unique in our desire to have a universal healthcare system. There are at least 28 other countries with universal healthcare around the world. These are countries like Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, France, Australia. They all share the same goal, but they have far more resources than we do. They have much shorter wait times. Canada, in fact, is ranked somewhere close to the bottom when it comes to physicians, close to the bottom when it comes to beds, and certainly lost when it comes to our healthcare wait times. We do well on certain other things, but these are clearly areas where we're falling behind. I think it would be a really good first step to say, what are the things that these other countries do differently? What can we learn from them? And what can we actually use in a Canadian context? Unfortunately, if we don't do that, if we stick with the policies that we have, we're also going to stick with the problems and the failures that we have in the Canadian system. All I think everybody wants to do is to try and improve the healthcare system to the best that they can.
Are you finding that more and more Canadians are deciding to, skip the queue and maybe go down to the United States for their surgeries, or even further south to Mexico?
No, this is something that this particular study is not being looked at. We have a bit of a tangential way to try and understand how many Canadians are actually traveling outside of Canada, not particularly in the US or other countries. But we're relying on doctors knowing that's what's happened. And it's difficult that patients would generally tell their doctors. There are, however, some other wonderful studies actually done by a Canadian institute, Second Street Consulting, that I think identified more than 200,000 Canadians who traveled abroad. Our last estimate was that it was about 50,000. But again, this is for the procedures that we're looking at, and I think are likely conservative estimates.
So circling back to Canada here and Western Canada, how well did Alberta rank when it came to wait times?
Unfortunately, Alberta is facing some very, very serious challenges. Alberta is ranking 7th out of the 10 provinces. The wait time is longer than the national average, and it's certainly longer than some of the top performing provinces like Ontario and Quebec, and indeed even Saskatchewan and BC. The total wait time that we measured in Alberta last year was 29 weeks. And as we talked about earlier, the national average in Canada is 22.6 weeks. So even though we are seeing historically high records in Canada, that same story is true in Alberta, but to an even greater extent, where the 29-week wait is, again, the longest that we've ever recorded in Alberta's history.
Now, among the various specialties out there, national wait times were longest between a referral by a GP and ophthalmology surgery, 34.1 weeks. What's the reason for such long wait times for eye surgery?
We're actually seeing very similar long wait times for orthopedic surgery and elective plastic surgery as well. Be a little bit of a mixed bag together with these three procedures. In Canada, we generally have a triage system like most other countries where, if you're a patient who is looking for medical or radiation oncology, you are going to get obviously prioritized. The problem is in Canada, everybody else really seems to be brushed off and expected to wait almost years for treatment. Again, in Alberta, actually, if we look at otolaryngology and orthopedic surgery, the wait time is at or in excess of 1 year. Essentially, we're in a situation where, if you have a serious condition, yes, our healthcare system is probably pretty good and will try and save you. Unfortunately, if it's something that won't kill you immediately, if it's something that is just going to be painful for people for a long time, you're expected to live with it and just put up with the long wait time. And I think that's really what we need to remember. These are real patients that we need to take care of.
Now, the shortest wait times are for medical oncology, which is a pretty good thing for cancer patients. I think it's just over 4 weeks, correct?
Absolutely. We are seeing much shorter wait times for medical and radiation oncology, which is about 4 or 5 weeks in those procedures. But again, this is really getting back to, yes, we should celebrate those wins, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that we should forget all those other patients, those patients who are waiting 34 weeks on average for eye surgery, those patients who in Alberta are waiting over a year for orthopedic surgery. We need to find a little bit of a balance to try and figure out how we can actually attend to all of these patients, or at the very least try and give them some sort of option or alternative for recourse when the public system cannot help them because of the burden and pressure it's under.
As you know, Bacchus, the COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating for people's mental health all across North America and around the world. Do we know if wait times for psychiatrists and psychologists have increased due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, our survey can give us a little bit of an understanding. We are asking psychiatrists how long their patients are waiting for treatment, and our estimate is actually very similar to the estimate for the 12 procedures. It's somewhere about between 22 and 23 weeks. But I do need to provide caution because we do have a much lower response rate for psychiatry this year. But again, this is something where if we look at it historically, in general, we are finding excessively long waits. A very similar story where patients are waiting longer than what's considered to be clinically reasonable for psychiatry patients as well.
What about wait times when it comes to various diagnostic procedures such as MRIs or CAT scans? What are we looking at there?
This is a really critical issue. We talked about triaging, and one of the key tools that we need for triaging is access to diagnostic technology in a timely manner. Unfortunately, again, we are seeing incredibly long wait times for these diagnostic procedures. For MRIs, it's about 11 weeks in Canada. For CT scans, it's about 5 weeks. And again, in Alberta, this is an area where Alberta is really, really struggling. For MRIs, the average wait time in Alberta is in excess of 25, I believe it's 26 weeks. And for CT scans, it's about 14 weeks. So, huge issues there. We can't really expect to have a functioning triage system if patients can't get diagnosed on time. So this is really something we need to work on and focus on, I think, quite urgently.
So what can we really do to improve our healthcare performance? What can we learn from other countries who are doing so much better than Canada?
That's a difficult question. What I can say is that there is a set of universal healthcare countries that tend to have more resources, shorter wait times, and are spending about the same as we do. These are countries like Australia, France, Germany, Sweden, Netherlands, Switzerland. They all tend to do three things differently. The first is they have a very different approach to the private sector. Unlike in Canada, where we see them as sort of the antithesis of our public healthcare system, over there they embrace them as either a partner to help deliver on the universal promise, or as an alternative to say, okay, when the public system is burdened, patients can access these services privately. The second is they expect patients to share in the cost of treatment. Now, this is something that can be very controversial in Canada, but most of the universal healthcare systems do expect small co-payments related to your income and with caps so that it's never a financial burden. The third thing is that they fund their hospitals based on activity. This incentivizes hospitals and pays them every time a patient comes in. In Canada, because of our government-only approach, we have what's called global budgets. And essentially, while that's good at controlling costs, what it does is it sort of makes hospitals see patients as a cost in an economic term, because every time a patient comes in, they're eating into that budget. Now, it's not to say any one of these things will magically fix Canada's healthcare system or that they may even be palatable in Canada's context, but it's important to know that these are things that other countries that do have shorter wait times while having universal healthcare do differently. So let's try and figure out what actually works in a Canadian context to just help all these patients who are waiting inordinately long for their medical treatment.
Bacchus Brewer, the Associate Director, Health Policy Studies with the Fraser Institute, and one of the co-authors of the study, Waiting Your Turn, Wait Times for Healthcare in Canada. Thanks for joining me today from Vancouver.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.